You want to hear about an unlikely hero, right? If you were asked who in the Democrat Party is the least likely to say something that we would agree with, that's currently like contentious, that's currently controversial, AOC, Biden, two good guesses. The person we're about to cover is not the first person that you would name, but he's within the top 5, maybe 10. Fetterman says migrant crisis threatens American dream for native-born citizens. I guess he really did get brain damage. He's right. That's the problem.
Or it fixed his brain.
Yeah, exactly. His.
It's like the episode of The Simpsons where Homer has the crayon removed and then just becomes a genius.
Yeah.
Doesn't that mean that canonically he's brain damaged for the entire show? Because he didn't get put back in or something.
Yes, he did.
It's so stupid. All right, let's have a look at some of these. I don't know what the play here is, because Fetterman, like, as far as we know, he was like people call him a hatchet man for the Democrats. I'm not sure exactly what he was doing, but he was some sort of like operative, and he was just shoved in there because they needed someone to fill the space. What happened? Is he trying to like change sides? I don't think anyone on the Republican side is going to trust him. Who knows what is happening here? But he does seem to be advocating for right-wing ideas here. Let's see. Maybe we've missed something. Newsweek says John Fetterman changes political identity as he fights Democrats on the border. Don't know what happened here. Let's watch a video, though. This is from CNN.
I honestly don't understand why it's controversial to say we need a secure border. And I think two things can be true at the same time. You can be very supportive of immigration, but we also need to have a secure border. And I think about immigration as we want to provide the American dream for any migrant. But it seems very difficult when you have 300,000 people showing up encountered at our border to do that. And I think we need to do a reset, and we have to work together and develop a new comprehensive solution to that.
That's surprising. I wasn't expecting to hear that from Fetterman or anyone in the Democrat Party. What's he playing at? Democratic Senator John Fetterman's shedding of the progressive label he once proudly espoused is partially due to some liberals' views on immigration and the southern border. The senator from Pennsylvania defeated Republican challenger Dr. Mehmet Oz, which, again, many people question the validity of that. Though Oz was not that popular, Fetterman was kind of ogre, so it's weird to think he got any votes, but it's an odd one. It may have been legit, though. By a 5-point margin in the 2022 election. In that election and the years leading up to it, including during his failed 2016 Senate bid, Fetterman defined himself as a progressive and backed Senator Bernie Sanders as a Democratic Party's presidential nominee that same year. He has shied away from the designation as of yet. More stories on this, apparently. Fetterman has recently become more outspoken against issues about issues like the US-Mexico border and the war in Gaza, saying he's no longer a progressive but just a regular Democrat. Honestly, that would not be so bad. If he's like, I mean, we've often said that Trump is basically a 90s Democrat. If that's what Fetterman's become, fine. I'm not sure I buy it. Trust him a lot less than I trust Vivek, and I'm still constantly saying how suspicious I am of him, whilst lauding what he's saying, regardless. It's odd, but it's probably ultimately for the best, unless it's some scheme. We don't know yet. Not sure what it would be, though. What scheme could this lead to, chat? Any ideas? He has sounded an alarm on the situation down south, exacerbated by a monthly record of 300,000 migrants being processed in December. That's monthly, according to data released by US Customs and Border Protection. And that's what the federal government's agency, who is letting this happen, says. It could be way more than that. Could be 1 million a month. There is a crisis, Fetterman told the New York Post last week. New York Post is a right-leaning mainstream publication, so he went there, he talked to them, referencing the December influx of migrants. Quote, "We have a crisis at our border and it can't be controversial that we should have a secure border." I'd like to hear him say something that a Democrat wouldn't write in an attempt to sound like a Republican. I want him to hear him say something a bit unique. We haven't got that yet. I'll keep an ear out. He added that's larger than the population of Pittsburgh. That's Pennsylvania's second largest city, and that's 1 month. Yeah, it is that worrying. And if he can say this while not believing it, I mean, what do we even say about it at that point? That's frankly almost unbelievable that someone could be aware of that and not be concerned. The only exception is those who are using it as a weapon deliberately against the American people. Many people would and have assumed that Fetterman is on board with those people. Maybe not. Matthias says the brain-damaged puppet candidate resurrects the conservative wing of the Democrats. All right, I'll admit it, that's actually shocking. Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't on my calendar for 2024, January 2024. Was it on anyone else's? It's remarkable, frankly. It's very surprising. His brain damage made him forget who he was supposed to be fighting, says Matthias. His brain underwent a factory reset from the stroke. Honestly, I don't know much about strokes, but I do, I'm vaguely aware that they can cause differences in, maybe it's a hormonal thing, maybe it's blood chemicals.
Not just that, near-death experiences in general, like there's a lot of times people wake up from them and they just completely change, so who knows, really. But
Nicholas
when it comes
says,
to the brain,
Yeah. Nicholas says, what are the odds that we're going to hear reports of him getting another stroke? Maybe. Now, chat, I will say that around the time that that happened, there was a lot of talk about him being replaced by someone else. We looked into that. Seems to be false. It seems that the evidence that was given was scant and actually in some cases from 6 months earlier. So that seems to be false. Although at first it did look very compelling, it does seem that evidence was false. That narrative was false. He may in fact have gone into the hospital and genuinely after having a stroke had that experience, maybe as Dice said, had a near-death experience, but at least had a stroke, which is at least affects the brain. And that may have changed some of his sensibilities, just some of his basic principles. He's sort of been readjusting since then, and maybe now he is a more conservative Democrat. It'd be very interesting. I mean, it doesn't take much. It shouldn't take much. You people that are the younger among you, and I'm not that old compared to many people who are aware of this stuff, but especially the younger among you, may not be aware of the notion that the Democrats used to be somewhat sane. There was a time, not very long ago, where 300,000 people coming across the border per month would have been bad in everyone's opinion. And so if all he is now is a non-insane Democrat, we'll take it. Absolutely fine. Frankly, the left needs to grow some balls and kick out these extremists. Another thing that he did that's similar, apparently, John Fetterman faces rebellion from Democratic voters. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's their way of getting rid of him and putting in someone who is not their, ogre. Putting in someone who they think is more political. Maybe that's what it is. Senator John Fetterman could land himself in trouble with voters after he doubled down on his claims that he is not a progressive Democrat, despite comments he made during his election campaign. Quote, "I'm not a progressive, I'm just a regular Democrat," Fetterman said on X, formerly Twitter. The statement was contradicted by the website's community notes feature, referencing tweets from Fetterman in 2016 and 2020, in which he clearly said he was a progressive. Despite the contradiction, Fetterman has noticeably shifted away from his position, upon which he narrowly defeated Trump-endorsed Mehmet Oz in the 2022 midterms, which we said already, maybe a little sus. Politicians such as Bernie Sanders, an independent closely aligned with the left of the Democratic Party, have called for a ceasefire in Gaza, whereas Fetterman has said he supports the Israeli response to the attack by the Palestinian military group Hamas, unequivocally, despite criticism that it's been too strong. So, despite the left's overwhelming support for Palestine over Israel, Fetterman supports Israel. Not sure what's going on there. It's curious. Chat, could he be our guy? I don't think so, but could he be a little better than our direct enemy? He may be. Now, that's the only theory I can come up with so far. The only theory I can think of is they are trying to quietly and subtly poison pill him to Democrat voters so they can replace him with a different Democrat. One that is more sort of inner party, more politically aware and capable, and obviously still someone that they control. That's the only sort of conspiracy theory I can currently think of on this. And remember, theorizing about conspiracies is responsible behavior for a citizen. Because conspiracies happen all the time. So yeah, that's a really weird one.
I don't know know too much about this guy, so like I have no idea what like his political views were before this, or how crazy and drastic the change is after his stroke. But like like I said, it's not uncommon for people to have this happen to them after a near death experience. And if it was a stroke as well, the brain and shit, like there's all sorts of things that can make somebody start acting differently.
Yep.
It could, as you say, though, be like an intentional thing on what he's doing. And I've told you many times where people can just lie about their political views and then get into power and then do the exact opposite of what they were saying. So there could be that angle as well, where he's just putting on a facade and using his what happened to him to gain trust in the other sphere. There's a lot of possibilities.
Yep. It might.
Maybe he's just pulling a reverse Bojo before and after he got COVID.
It might be that that this guy is sort of maybe already directly forming a kind of new wing of the Democrat Party alongside RFK, who of course RFK was sort of ejected from the Democrat Party, but is still more so on the left than the right. But it's a far more reasonable version of the left. Di, you remember, I think, back 10-ish years ago, where there were plenty of insane people on the left, but there were also some sane people on the left, and there almost are none these days. It's so hard to find anyone on the left who's not insane.
Yeah, it's odd, really. Well, this is what happens when they go to extremes, right? Because people that were in the middle back in those days now would be considered just far right, just by the nature of them being normal.
Basically, you and I still, I mean, we're pretty close to that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe
yeah, and
me.
that's
I'm not sure. I don't want to talk for you.
no, it's the same for me. Like even when I do like those political tests and stuff like that, it's not. I'm still unironically quite liberal, judging from what they tell me. But I think just there's a lot of dislike of the controlling of speech and what you can and can't say, and losing a lot of freedoms just on the internet in general. Like
Yeah.
most common day people, if it's not as convenient, people are just going to dislike it. And their whole thing, I think, has been making things more convenient, but while gaining more power. Like I think there's a lot of people that are more self-aware of political issues, especially with the young generation growing up. Like there's so many of them that are very political now.
Mhm.
And that might be just by the nature of it being in schools, and them actively pushing agendas and these kind of fucking really crazy ideas through the schooling system, which, as we know, if you try and push somebody in a direction, oftentimes they will go the opposite just because fuck
Yeah.
you, right? Like that's
Yeah.
just what happens. So it's like, I don't know, it's odd, the craziness.
Mm.
I think it's a good thing though, because they've gotten so crazy that everyone's like, okay, we've obviously gone too far now, and then they're going to try and start pushing more and more back. But they're still full on going.
Mm.
Like they're not stopping, which is the worrisome thing about it.
Mm.
And they're so loud.
Yeah.
Companies need to just stop capitulating to insanity, and we might start getting like some decent games and stuff nowadays. I don't want to wear a pronoun badge.
Are we? Yeah, indeed. Are we still like not entirely, but to a significant extent? Are we still that meme where it's like I just wanted to play video games?
Like
that's where I
remember,
started on this stuff. That's where I came from originally, basically.
I remember when they were like, I don't need a label to describe myself. Fuck you. You don't label me shit. And it went from that to like, I'm labeling myself and having like a bunch of them on me at my person at all times, so they know how to address me. And it's like a complete shift. And I don't know how that's happened.
Mm.
Like I really have no idea. And that's just one out of the many things that has happened that has kind of pushed people, I think, more to the quote unquote right. I don't think they've actually been pushed to the right though. I think they're still in the middle, but the other are just so insane now. I don't know. It's odd. It's very odd.
A lot of us probably did, Deckwell, yeah. I think the first I saw of it was through The Amazing Atheist, through Drunken Peasants back then. Because back then, the word skeptic referred to people who were atheists, but were also willing to be skeptical about other things. That didn't last, unfortunately, as you've seen with TJ now, but I think the idea still makes sense, that through that pedigree of being skeptical of creationism, which even if you're religious was kind of ridiculous, going through that era, and then through Gamergate being on the right side of that as well, and then going into more broad modern politics through Trump, through all the way to now, good thing that there's at least one person who is on the right side of all those issues, maintaining what I see as the duty of the ideal of skeptic, trying to do it properly.
And every time I hear the word skeptic, I cringe now. So I think it's just fully dead.
It is unfortunately kind of an old term now. Yeah, it's had its heyday, but I'm referring specifically to the heyday.
Yeah, I know
what it represents is still something that should be. What it represents, ideally speaking, is still something to admire and try to embody. But yeah, I think probably a lot of us came through that similar route. A lot of us didn't. A lot of us probably were already on the right. But I was on the left back then, and pretty close to the center for most of it. And then
I was like quite the leftist.
I think like back in maybe 2014, 2015, I was like dead center of Green Square. And now I think I'm probably slightly right of exact center. It's middle, up and down, probably. I haven't tested in ages though. It might be slightly left of center. I'm not sure.
But I think even in my most leftist ways, you still had more freedom to like speak, like the insults and stuff. Nobody was trying to like really censor it, besides on Tumblr. Because again, I grew up on South Park, so even with those views, I still feel like if lefties would look at me back then, they would consider me still far right. I think that's how it's just just crazy the shift that has happened.
So yeah, this is a weird story, but we'll keep an eye on old Fetterman. Maybe there's more to see from him yet.